Are you a current or future physician assistant wanting to learn more about finances? Then join me on this journey to become a PA the FI way. Hi, my name is Kat, and I'm a practicing certified physician assistant who will be your host. It took me 5 years after I started practicing medicine as a PA to thoroughly dive into my personal finances after I discovered the concept of financial independence. I want to use what I have learned to help you avoid some of the financial mistakes that I have made while sharing some of the financial wins that I have had along the way. Join me as we discuss financial strategies to guide you to becoming a physician assistant on the way to financial independence. Welcome back, everyone, to PA the FI Way. I'm your host, Kat, and today we have a very special guest. We have a PA named Alexis, who is going to tell us a little bit more about her role as an ICU PA, but also as a Locum Tenens PA. Welcome to the show, Alexis. So excited to have you.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Everybody, my name is Alexis. I am a Locum Tenens, pretty much full-time critical care physician assistant, and I have been functioning in this realm for about 3 years now. And what I do is I travel through multiple different states, and I cover in the ICU and a variety of different settings, including the neuro ICU, the cardiac ICU, the trauma surgical ICU, and the medical ICU. I started in the trauma surgical ICU and kind of moved to the medical ICU from there. And then during COVID really is when I started expanding into locum tenens work and realized there's so much of it out there. So I have almost just never looked back. So a little bit about me too, of course, personally, being somebody who locums and travels to many different states. I love traveling outside of work. My husband is actually working on moving from a private to commercial airline pilot. So we travel all over the place together around my contracts. And if we're not traveling, we are otherwise maybe wake surf, boating on the beach, doing any type of outdoor activity to just relax. But anyways, today I basically came on to talk to people about what it means to be a locum tenens provider, how it can offer you financial stability and freedom, and really what are the benefits of doing it. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that introduction and also how you and I found each other through Instagram. There was kind of a viral thing going around Instagram about how I heard PAs were following other PAs, and Alexis and I connected through there, and we started DMing each other, found out that we went to the same PA program, DMU, but we were a few years apart, so we didn't know each other until now. And I just like to share that it's always fun when you can reach out to other PAs and grow your PA community. So excited to have this conversation with you today.
Yeah, it was the best small world thing ever. And also I love, finding anyone ever from Iowa because I currently live in Florida. And so it's somewhat rare. And so that was the greatest connection online. Loved that.
Absolutely. Yeah, although I'm from Minnesota, I went to PA school in Iowa for a couple years and enjoyed it a little bit more than I thought I would. It was a really fun program for sure.
Midwest is the best.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And Alexis, thanks so much for sharing about yourself and a little bit about your PA work. Before we dive a little bit more into that later in the episode, let's talk about how you discovered the concept of financial independence. When was that at your point of life or your point of your PA career? And then what initially sparked your interest about the FI community?
So ultimately, I think everybody out there wants to be financially stable. I think from a very young age, I wanted or had the dreams that, I would be financially independent and stable and be able to travel the world and do whatever I wanted at hopefully a younger age. Unfortunately, that's not realistic for everybody in the world. You do have to work really hard to get there. But I think from a very young age, I was exposed not to a cool story like mine, but to a cool story of my stepfather, who is a perfect example. He came into my life when I was younger in like middle school, high school time. And he came from a very small town where nobody barely ever graduated high school, let alone college. He definitely did not go to college. And he also basically worked his butt off, worked many, many hours, making very little money in the middle of nowhere until he was able to to save just enough money to buy a duplex, in which case he lived in one side of the duplex and he rented out the other side of the duplex and found that by doing it, he did not have to pay his rent at all. The other person paid for his rent. So then he started saving his rent from that duplex and he saved that for a few years until he was able to take all of that money that he had saved and put it into another duplex that he was able to purchase. And ultimately, he repeated this scenario at bigger and bigger buildings, ultimately, till he got to apartment complexes. This led to him learning along the way how to do everything himself, construction wise, when things went wrong or things needed to be fixed. He figured out how to fix it so he could save his money and not pay anybody to do these kinds of things. He got tons of different licenses along the way doing that and developed his own construction company and has been flipping houses, rentals, short-term rentals, long-term rentals since I've known him today. And he is like one of the most successful people that I know. And he never went to college. And I took that and thought, I have my own dreams, my own goals. I wanted to work, I knew, in some type of scientific field, and ultimately that ended up being medicine. And it's crazy to think if we have the capability with all of the knowledge base that we get going to school, to graduate school, and still apply that same type of drive, interest, and pursuit at success, then it makes it so much easier for us to just skyrocket so much faster and more than someone like even my stepdad did. And so I saw somebody who came from nothing and still was able to generate financial freedom, financial independence. So for me, I recognized if you live well below your means for at least a good period of time, while you're building your success, that it allows you to catapult yourself later, until you are truthfully extremely financially independent and free. And at that point, you can do whatever you want with your money. But once you get to the point where you can have your money making money for you, I think that is the secret. That's the secret sauce, is realizing I need to save my money so that my money can make money for me.
Absolutely. And put your money to work for you too, not just
Exactly.
hoard it away in a
Yes,
savings
in a
account or under
savings
your
account.
mattress or
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah, recognizing the importance of investments and different investment strategies, whatever it is that you're interested in investing in, but funneling your capital into some type of investment structure so that, like you said, money is making money for you. It's working for you.
Sure. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about your finance story a little bit later in the show. Before we dive back into the episode, I want to take a quick moment and share about an amazing resource for you. You might be like many PAs, where you think that you should probably start taking more control of your money, start paying more attention to your money, but maybe you're afraid to actually even start looking at your money and wondering, where in the world is it all going every single month? I created something to help you with that. It's called the PA Freedom Money Planner, and it's a completely free resource for you. This money planner helps you see an overall picture of where your money is actually going every single month. It helps you track your money and also helps you decide where you want to put your money so that you are reaching your goals. You can grab your free copy at pathefiway.com/money planner or by clicking the link down in the show notes or description. And if you want to take that a step further to learn the framework to simplify your money, buy back your time, and create the option to work less, you can also join the waitlist for my upcoming program that I've been quietly working on behind the scenes called the PA Freedom Method. There are already several PAs on that waitlist. You can join them over at pathefiway.com/waitlist. Now back to the show. Let's talk a little bit more about your PA career. You mentioned that you work in critical care currently. I'm curious, have you worked in other specialties throughout your PA career, and what experiences you've had that have shaped your PA career overall?
Of course. I started off actually working in a primary care structure. I covered some of their urgent cares, and it was very different, obviously, from my very second job, which was straight into trauma surgery. And I definitely learned a lot. I'm glad that I did have that basis for about a year because I did get to see how the outside world is working in primary care fields. I do recognize how difficult that is and all of the different red tape that they're having to go through, that we do not have to go through at the bedside inside of a hospital. We have plenty of our own frustrations, but it is very different in an outside the hospital realm. Personally, it was not what I was interested in because I was frustrated with the timing criteria. There was that constant drive to see more patients, write more notes, bill higher, things that obviously were going to bring revenue to not necessarily myself, but to the clinics, which I understand because I do understand a business, of course. Even being here, I understand what a business is. I understand why they're trying to make money, but it made medicine feel less and less personable and less about the patient. And I know that's what most people are struggling with today in healthcare across the board. Um, but nobody would hire me initially where I thought I wanted to work, which was the ER. So that is how I ended up in that role. And then I'm very lucky that just how things worked out, I did never get hired in the ER, and instead I transitioned into a trauma surgical and ICU role straight out from a primary care role and only grew from there into the hospital. So I think that it was a great background to have, but I also think every area in medicine you learn something, regardless of where it is. So yeah,
That's so true. I
yeah,
started in primary care myself in family medicine and can
yeah,
definitely recognize and identify that it was a good baseline knowledge to help with my current role in outpatient psychiatry and yet
yeah.
also see those frustrations of primary care that you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. So it's nice knowing about it because of course I work with a lot of people who maybe have never worked outpatient ever, and so they don't fully grasp the frustrations of constantly being behind, constantly having to see lab results and respond to things outside of the clinic hours, constantly be seeing people on like a little time slot, and whether or not you have enough time for them will affect the rest of your day. I do understand all of those things. And so I feel very grateful that I don't have to deal with that anymore being inside the hospital. But it does affect how sometimes I even approach patients in the hospital because when they're coming into the ER because they've had DK or they're not able to get their medications, I understand that a little bit more that it's not just the patient's fault, it's the system. So,
Sure. It
mm.
likely makes you more empathetic to both the patient as well as the primary care providers out there.
Yeah, 100%, 100%, yes.
For some of the listeners who might not be familiar with what in the world locum tenens actually is and what it means, do you mind sharing a little bit more about that as well as how you first got started with it?
Yes. So locum tenens, I tell everybody, it is a Latin term, like everything in medicine, and it means to hold the place of. So ultimately, you can think of locum tenens as like a temporary contracted fill-in job structure, where basically my job as a locum tenens provider is to replace someone else who has left or been lost for some reason for a temporary period of time. The period of time can vary anywhere from sometimes it's just a few weeks to sometimes it's 6 months to a year. The reason we typically see people leaving or we see locum contracts popping up is normally when a hospital, and in my setting in an ICU, they're losing a provider for illness that somebody actually formally quit, and it takes 3 to 6 months to find another candidate, 3 to 6 months to credential another candidate, and they need somebody in there now. I've also seen this locum tenens being used very frequently in ICU settings that are doubling their size or growing significantly. And so they need temporary coverage to come in while they're hiring their staff and expanding. And then, of course, we do get a lot of maternity leaves. That'll cover a lot of maternity leaves for, a 3 month period of time. And so the contracts may vary. A lot of the times it's flexible for you as the provider, but they'll come to you with ultimately what their primary needs are. So you go, you work somewhere for a period of time that you've agreed upon at the very beginning, and then you're gone. So that's how it works.
How did you first get into locums? What did that look like?
So I ultimately started locuming during COVID. And so not that it was a good thing, but during COVID it was a good thing to be exposed to locums because there was so much. There was a plethora of work. And at the time where I was working in a medical ICU setting and I had a history of working in the trauma surgical ICU, suddenly every single ICU needed you. And it felt like I could go to any hospital in the entire country and get a job, which was tempting. And at first, I was very apprehensive and I was scared. I think, like anybody is when they consider locums, when someone tells them or encourages them to try locum tenens work, because it's not your familiar space. You think that you can't take your skills and go somewhere else and still be competent or still be good at what you do. And so I was very scared, but because there was so much need and everyone seemed it truthfully was desperate for care. I thought this is my opportunity to go see what it's like in other ICUs out there without feeling terribly insecure about my own capabilities. Not that I didn't have them. I found out very quickly that once you go to other places, that critical care certainly does translate pretty similarly across different places because every ICU is following the same standards of care. They're all using evidence-based medicine. And so if you're doing that in your ICU currently, it doesn't matter what state you're in. You'll find that it's pretty much the same everywhere you go. And that ultimately what you are learning that is different is just different cultures, different availabilities. There's different hospitals that have much different staffing and ultimately unique niches that they have that other smaller hospitals might not have available to their patient care. And you get to learn from that along the way. So I started with it during COVID's because there was so much available. But ultimately, what I started doing was just looking around me and reaching out to all the different hospitals that needed work.
Sounds as though you decided to have the courage to take the chance and try something new, not only for locums, but also have the courage to do that during a pandemic too.
Yeah, that was COVID was a very unique situation. It's interesting talking about it now too, just the timing, because of course it's all over the news right now recently that people are saying, was there not ICUs that were empty in the United States? And being somebody who personally worked in 5 different states during the COVID pandemic, being New York, Florida, Texas, Massachusetts, like all of these very big cities that people think about when they think about COVID, it was absolutely horrendous. And yeah, part of the reason that I got to start my locums career was because the entire United States was dying. And that's terrible to say. And I do find it very disheartening that there's still people that I know directly that question if that was even real, question that the healthcare society was intentionally trying to harm people or intentionally trying to make money from some type of COVID scheme. At least what I can say is being someone who worked with so many providers, clinicians across multiple different states and different ICUs, I never saw even a little ounce of anyone trying to take advantage of the patients. Ultimately, what I saw was terrible situations where people in healthcare were trying their very best to just be human and watching people die every single day. And I definitely, my personal experience, I have more than 1 month that I remember writing a death summary every single day for 30 days straight. And yes, I worked 30 days straight, more than 1 month in a row, which I would never do again. I was just kind of at that point in my career and life where I was still working full time and then locuming on the side. And there was just you felt terrible saying no sometimes to hospitals that said if we can't get you, we can't get them, we can't get them, then we have literally no provider to be in our hospital. And every single patient in the ICU is on a ventilator. So that's when they started hiring people who had no critical care experience whatsoever to man certain ICUs, like anesthesia, who obviously knows ventilators and things, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable with medical management, but they would hire like ENT surgeons and people that had any realm of possibility, family practice, hospitalists that had any experience with ventilators. They were hiring literally anyone who would staff an ICU if they didn't have an ICU provider. So it's crazy. I could definitely write a whole podcast or book about my experiences and the things you saw. So I don't know where healthcare is going, but
Yeah, it was a very interesting time for many of us working in healthcare. And yet I feel as though inpatient providers had probably a harder struggle because they were seeing lots of things inpatient that we just weren't seeing outpatient.
yeah. I mean, regardless, it's, the struggle existed I don't know. I'm a hardened ICU person. I guess this is where this comes from. Is it? There's many, many times where it was emotionally terrible, and yeah, you saw sad young people dying, and you had to deal with their family members, and like it does, it like makes you feel emotional just talking about it. But in general, it was your job. Like you go to work to, try to fix people's lungs, to try to bring them back, make them more likely to leave the hospital. So I don't know. I'm not one of those, like, I think certain parts of the hospital were more heroic than others. I think the whole system was working together, but it definitely was not fake. It definitely was a real thing, and ICU beds were absolutely overflowing everywhere. There's no question about that.
I'm curious how that experience and going through that also shifted perspective about money and life and priorities for you, if you don't mind touching on that.
Oh, yeah. So I, as someone who works in the ICU, beyond even COVID, just in general, working critical care and seeing very unfortunate things happen to young people, to um, the most unwarranted situations happening to the nicest human beings at all stages of their life. It sits with me when I leave work and I recognize how important it is to enjoy a quality of life, to have people that you love close to you, and to value those things as much as money matters, which it does matter. It does not buy happiness. It does not equate to a quality of life that you may imagine it would. So, as much as I love talking about financial independence because it does bring us things that we want and that we enjoy, you can be fulfilled with less. And I think that's why sometimes for some people who are very successful, it's easy to say live below your means for a period of time until you have built your own financial stability in order to live beyond your means, because you can live a very full life living below your means. And yes, it is one of those situations where sometimes it's very hard to live in the moment, be grateful for every little thing in life. But I think practicing truthfully just simply gratification is huge, because I work with a population of patients that all they really want to do is go outside and, walk or eat food, very simple things that we take for granted every day. And it's hard to not take those things for granted, but it's a good reminder working in a realm where you see so many people that don't get to do the things that we get to do every day.
Can only imagine how that makes you more intentional with how you're living your life.
Yeah, it's easy to fall out of that, but it's a good reminder. It is a healthy reminder. Yeah.
For sure.
Mhm.
Would you mind sharing a little bit more about how you typically find your locum opportunities? And do you usually travel out of state, or do you stay close to where you live, or a little bit of both, kind of depending on the situation?
Yeah. So I have truthfully done everything to find jobs. So when I first started, and when a lot of people reach out to me about how to get into locums, what I truthfully did was I would Google, Miami, Florida plus critical care physician assistant plus, trauma surgery or whatever it was specifically I was looking for. And I would try to look through different job boards to find if there was any opportunity that fit even close to what I was looking for. I would do that recurrently, repetitively. Every few days I would look for weeks on end while I was at one certain assignment and while I was working full time. And ultimately, when I would find a job that had existed in the past, or even a job that was existing but maybe had closed, I would specifically go to that locum agency's website and I would call their representatives directly so that I could talk with them. And normally what happens is then they ask for your CV, your resume, they ask you about your experience and what you're looking for. You share that information with those representatives and they keep it. Even if the location that was listed is no longer accepting applicants or it had been closed months before, then they now have your information and they'll keep in touch with you if something similar comes back available. And I just did that so many times that ultimately what happened was I would take a job with any company that ended up working where I wanted it to be. My search for work was very intentional based off location. I wanted to be in certain places that I had some type of tie to. Normally it was to a family or friend or somewhere that my husband and I really, really enjoyed. And so we had a reason for wanting to go there, which I think in a locum structure makes a locums job more likely to be successful for you because you'll actually enjoy being there. So that's how I would typically start finding jobs. And then the more and more you do that, the more you have this plethora of locum tenens representatives from different companies that you have a relationship with. And now where I am is when there's a job that comes live anywhere near where I live or the states that I cover, I end up getting like 5 or 6 people who send me the same job opportunity. And normally then at that point, now I can say, okay, what are you paying for this job and what do you cover? Like what type of incentives are you covering, hotel things? And then I just pick who ultimately gives me the best. So then I get to kind of make it for me a little bit more, or I get to work with the company that I've worked with the best in the past and I have a very good relationship with because there are definitely differences between locums companies. And to answer your other question too, yes, I work in a variety of different states. I change where I'm going based off of where I am in my life. Like for instance, these next several months, I'm staying particularly in my own home state and just covering in a variety of different cities here because my sister had a baby. So just wanting to be here and be a little bit more supportive and be around the family. So I'm trying to make what works best for me in this realm.
That was such great information that you
Yeah.
shared. And
Yeah.
I really like how now you almost are having these different agencies negotiating against themselves for you,
Yeah.
right? They're now doing the
Yeah.
hard work. They're
Yeah.
finding the roles that they think that you
Hmm.
might be interested in, and they're giving you their
Yeah.
hopefully top best offer. And
Yeah.
you can just simply look at that and go from there. And it's not you having to take the time to search and try to
Yeah.
negotiate
Yeah.
one-on-one individually over a long course of time. So that's a really
Yeah.
cool setup that you have now.
One other thing I tell everybody who asks me starting in locum tenens to, how to do things, I always encourage them to always ask for more money. I don't care if it's $5 more an hour than what they tell you the pay range is. And it's not weird or uncomfortable to ask for the pay range. I think when I first started, I was very uncomfortable. I thought that that was kind of one of those when you are applying for a full-time job, you don't always ask about the price up front. You're here for the job. But now that I'm doing locums, I'm doing a critical care short-term thing. It does matter and it's part of the initial conversation and that's very normal. When you're calling someone up saying, "I'm interested in this position, can you tell me about it?" The things that you want to know about it specific to me work in critical care, I want to know how many ICU beds do they have? How many typical admissions do they have? Who am I working with? Is it me alone? Is this a day shift, a night shift? Are they 7 on, 7 off? What's the structure like? How many admissions am I going to see? Do I cover code blues? Do I cover rapids in the hospital? Am I seeing consults? Am I staying strictly in the ICU? Like what procedures am I going to be expected to perform? Knowing the bread and butter of the actual job, but then after that saying, okay, now that this sounds like something I'm interested in, what is the typical pay range that you're seeing and you're applying for, that you're seeing people apply with? And okay, I would like to ask for X. And whether you're asking for the very top dollar or $5 more than that is completely okay. It does not mean that they won't hire you, and you should, because a lot of times that money is actually coming out of the locum company and not the actual healthcare structure. The ranges sometimes I'll see they differ not because of what the hospital is paying, but because of what the locums company is keeping. So it's just good to know that.
Yeah, the agencies and companies are in it to also make money. So like you
Yeah,
said, there
it's a
very often
business.
is wiggle room for negotiation and they expect it too,
Yeah,
right? So they would
yeah,
probably think it's odd if you don't negotiate.
yeah, yeah. So.
Let's transition and talk about some of the biggest benefits that you have found with locum tenens. What have you enjoyed about it overall?
Mhm. Literally, this is my favorite question you could ask because there's so many benefits. And this is why every time I meet somebody who's even with a glimmer of interest, I'm like, do it, please do it. Yes, I was so scared to do it once. You are too. It's okay. Um, but there's really so many. And I will say it doesn't work for everybody. Obviously, the biggest kind of setback is that you do need to be willing to travel if you want it to work for you long term. everybody could do short-term locum contracts near them at home if they wanted to just do it alongside their full-time job. But if you wanted to do this more full-term and do it the way that I'm kind of doing it through a 1099 S-corp structure, you do need to be willing to move around in the setting that you can't find work right next to you, which will eventually happen at some point. So, but the huge benefit there is if you enjoy traveling and you have that flexibility and capability to leave and travel, you get to have some type of free experiences in a setting. For us, in a sense, it feels like where I get to go somewhere, they're always paying for your travel. So your hotel, your airfare, your mileage, your rental cars, everything that is wrapped into you getting to work is reimbursed to you. You can book all those things on your own credit cards and have them reimbursed through you. So you're getting your own credit card points. You're also on top of that building tons of hotel and airfare miles. And one side example, my husband and I, when we went on our honeymoon, we paid for our entire almost 2-week honeymoon to the Maldives and then Dubai and Greece for free on hotel points and airfare points that we both collectively had saved for like 2.5 years. So that's a long time, but that was an extremely high amount of money and very nice hotels that we did not have to pay for purely out of this benefit that people take for granted and they don't recognize is so huge. So outside of the point structure and the travel, because you can travel there, a lot of times we'll go on a trip or I'll go to work and my husband will come with me for a few days beforehand. And so my airfare is basically free to go wherever we're going. And for him, it's as if we just pay for one ticket and your locum tenens company will also typically pay for like the day before or the day after your arrival or leaving. So you almost feel like you also get one free day of hotel, which is nice. But those are just the travel benefits. Those are huge to me. But not only is there benefit there, but of course there's a lot of tax benefits if you are working primarily as a 1099 S corp structure. You can certainly now write off all of your work uses and beyond the things that you're getting paid for. So whether that's your CME, the things you're buying, your laptop, your speaker system, whatever it is that you're using for work, those are things that now you can write off under your S corp structure, your company. The last thing that's amazing for me, that's a huge benefit of working locum tenens that I never would have even had available to me if I hadn't made the leap and done it, was just experiencing the different cultures in medicine and seeing things that you would never see at your hospital. There were so many things that I did in my 1 or 2 hospitals I worked at that when I went to other places, they looked at me like, "What are you doing? Why would you do it that way?" And I thought that was the only way to do it because that's the only way I'd ever seen anybody do X, Y thing. And then I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, we've been doing it in a very weird, archaic way at my hospitals. And you just your eyes are open to other things in medicine. And you get to grow into that. You get to grow your own skill set, your own knowledge base. You get to see new things that you would never see at your own ICU. Like for instance, I got to do a locums opportunity in like a very heavily busy transplant cardiac ICU setting, which was not transplant is not my bread and butter. I was definitely out of my element there, but learned so much and got to take a lot of those things that I learned, like familiarity with VA ECMO and LVADs and RVADs and things like that. And now I get to take that to other hospitals that I'm covering that have very minimal experience with things like that. But that ECMO still comes every once in a while to these hospitals, but that people are not familiar with it. And I get to at least say, I have gained this knowledge from somewhere else and take it here. So the experiences, the ability to learn from different places is like huge. That is almost like purely the reason to do travel work and beyond all of the cool financial benefits of it. But, so.
I appreciate you sharing all that great information, and travel hacking is one of my favorite side hobbies too. So thanks for touching on that.
Yes.
And besides some of the benefits that you shared, do you mind sharing some of the unexpected challenges of working locums that have come up over the years for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think with challenges with locum tenens, it's just finding yourself in places that things that you have never done before. Like coming into an area of course of medicine where most of it does translate to be exactly the same, but then you may find yourself in a hospital that does things slightly differently or does offer different procedures or things that you've never worked with before. And so that can be a challenge when suddenly you have to very quickly and rapidly escalate your skills or expand them and be able to offer each hospital's capabilities. And so I think that can be definitely a challenge. Like I remember one time this was again way during COVID, and this is old school, not many hospitals do this, but they were placing quad catheters that were cooling catheters for patients at post cardiac arrest. It's not quite indicated, and so I had never seen one done before, but that was how they did their cooling structure. After somebody had a cardiac arrest, they would cool them by putting a catheter in their groin and then putting cold fluid through that, rather than most places that do like an exterior cooling structure. So I remember I was a lone sole provider on nights as a physician assistant. There's no attendings in house during that, and I had to call them and say, "Hey, I don't know what this is. What is this procedure?" And they were like, "It's exactly like a central line. You place it just like a central line." It pretty much is exactly a central line, and I did place it just like a central line, and it worked just fine. But I had to kind of pivot and learn something in that moment in the setting that this patient needs this procedure right now. Um, Anyways, lots of little things that you learn along the way that you may have otherwise never done. The other locums travels or complications would just be with traveling in general. I've definitely had situations where, a flight was delayed or, you get stuck somewhere that on your way there, and you don't make it to work that night. So pivoting and trying to be flexible is definitely the key thing that I've learned during locums. But again, those things happen. We're all human. Stuff like that exists. And no matter whether or not you're a travel worker or you work from home, sometimes something happens that keeps you from getting to work. But I don't have tons and tons of challenges other than just finding yourself in new places with different personalities that you have to work to figure out how to be a great team player with.
I'm sure you could write a book about that, Alexis. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing all of that, and that it's also good to hear that you haven't had too many challenges over the years.
I mean, there's day to day, many, many challenges, but nothing that is crucial.
Nothing that you can't figure out, right?
Yeah.
And you did touch a little bit earlier about your S-corp. Let's talk about your business a little bit further, about what you've set up and what led you to structure your business that way and what it looked like to actually get things set up for you.
Yeah, so I made the decision to transition fully into an S-corp structure the second year that I started working full-time locums. And primarily I did this because I stalked a lot of online podcasts, YouTube videos. I will shout out to the White Coat Investor. Their website is extremely helpful. There's tons of knowledge there on how to be a successful investor as a clinician. And I found that through S-corps, the main thing through an S corporation is that you can now be the sole owner and CEO and sole employee of your company, and it allows you to pay yourself a W-2 that is a reasonable salary for yourself, but then the remainder of all of your income that you're getting from all of these 1099 payments is it's the income to your business, and that business income is not subjected to the same Social Security, the federal Social Security wage taxes. So I did like a video on this because so many people have asked me about this. The only negative about 1099 S-corp structure is it really only works if you primarily are making 1099 income. The more W-2 income you have on the side, the harder it is to have that business money in your account that's not subjected to that tax structure. So through an S corp, you can pay yourself your own W-2 wage and you can pay your business the remainder of all the money that you make. The S corp wage that you designate to yourself will be a W-2 structure that you would see any other day at any other job. Say that's $100,000. Say you make an additional $100,000 that year in total you're making $200,000 through your 1099 structure, then the remaining $100,000 that's sitting in your business account can now be basically seen as passive income to yourself as the CEO and investor. So you can take that money as a distribution. You can take all of it as a distribution throughout the year that you will still pay taxes on, but you will not pay the Social Security, Medicare income taxes, which equate to 15.2%. So basically, you're saving 15.2% on anything that is not considered your W-2 income that you set up for yourself. That should be an appropriate income for what you do as a physician assistant, whatever realm of job that you have. So, for instance, when I tell people if I make $200,000 a year, I pay myself $100,000 and I put $100,000 into my S-corp business bank account, and then I distribute that additional $100,000 to myself. That $100,000 is not subjected to the 15.2%, which is similar to about $15,000. So that's what I'm ultimately saving at the end of the year that I still get to use for whatever investment I feel like putting that into that year. So that is a better way to say that, but that's the main benefit to an S corp structure for locum tenens 1099. But outside of that, you also, of course, can write off all of your business uses. Most of your companies are going to be paying for your hotel, your travel, and so you can't really write those things off. But anything that they don't pay for, you can write off. You can also look up food payments in different cities. That is a federally regulated amount of a per diem rate for your food. And so I do that as well. I write off my food rather than keeping track of receipts. I just look up, and at the end of the year, I keep track of how many days I was in each city and then multiply that by the food rate, and you can write that off. You can write off, mileage they didn't cover for, gas they didn't cover for, a lot of things in your day to day. You can write off part of a part of a room in your house as your business if you are functioning entirely as an S corp and you use that room of your house to organize things for your business. There's a lot of those kind of unique niche write-offs that if you really want to get into it, you can find, but you can save a lot of money through just the tax structure if you're interested in setting it up. The setup process is also, I think it sounds really stressful, but it's not at all. You really just go to like your online, your state's online business website. Like for instance, I'm just talking about Florida because I'm very familiar with Florida, but you go to like floridasunbiz.com. You make the decision that you want to set up an LLC. It's very cheap to do that. I think it's like $95 to open an LLC. You have to just find a name of an LLC that doesn't exist and you incorporate it to yourself. And then once you have your LLC, which you can get instantly, then you have to go and apply for an EIN number. And you can just Google this as well, like apply for an EIN, which is basically a business account number, similar to like your social security number for you as a person. It's the identifying number for your business. And then once you get the EIN number, then you can go ahead and apply back again for an S corp by sending the information of your EIN and your LLC information, and it's takes about 2 to 4 weeks for the application process to be completed, but then they'll send you a letter in the mail that says you have your S corp. Here's your EIN associated with your S corp, and here's your name of your S corp, and it will be set up to whatever name and address that you had designated for it. But it's truthfully very simple steps that you can Google and just fill out. It does not take very long. This is maybe 2 hours of your life to set that up and be completely done. Beyond that, once you have an actual S corp set up and then you want to start getting paid in that S corp's name, this is quick and dirty, but you do need to get a business bank account that you open under that S corp's name with that EIN number. You can just walk into a Chase Bank, a Wells Fargo, whatever it is that you want, and just set up a bank account, but not in necessarily your name. It's in your business's name. And once you have that bank account, then you go online, you set up an automated payment service like ADP or Gusto. Sounds complicated, but it's very easy. All you do is you basically link the business bank account to the payee service, and then you now reach out to all of your companies and say, pay me to this account, which is the payee service. That payee service will just send your business bank account a W-2 payment every 2 weeks, like any job would do. And then you never touch it again. The payee services will file all of your quarterly things that are required for a company. And then at the end of the year, all you have to do is just file your own personal taxes. I always recommend finding a CPA who is familiar at all in S-corps, especially in locum tenens. If you do it, that'd be really great. There's a lot of those things on blogs online too, and people that are available that are very familiar with that, so that they can also give you more insight on what benefits you could find specifically for you and your niche in locums. But it sounds like a lot of steps. I promise it's not a lot of steps, and it saves you a lot of money. So it's great.
Thank you so much for sharing all that info and all of the steps with getting it set up. I also wanted to clarify with the listeners that sometimes you can also have an LLC without having it be an S-corp. So what I did with my tax professional was have that conversation. Is an S-corp actually beneficial? And then he helped with guidance with setting mine up as well for my telepsychiatry role. So definitely find a great tax professional in your state. And you might want to get a referral from people who are in your state too, whether other PAs or family members, friends, things like that. But it's really helpful if they are familiar with PAs, medical provider roles, locum tenens, if you do go that route, because they can keep giving you insight and help you throughout the year too. So that was all really great information. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Let's talk a little bit about how in the world do you keep all of your business finances organized and your expenses, your income? Are there certain tools that you like to use?
So I'm a terrible example for this one, I'm going to be honest, because I am a simple creature and I use Excel for everything. So I have come across some apps that people use that they basically auto follow your receipt structures. So if you're someone who is writing off receipts, I would strongly recommend that you do maybe find an app that you pay a certain amount of money a year that all you do is constantly take pictures of all of your receipts and purchases for work, and then it organizes all of that for you at the end of the year, creates like a nice structure to submit to your CPA to file your taxes. But I basically, same as you, I have found a CPA that's great, and I do realize the different check boxes that they're looking at for write-offs for the most part. As we might get into, my husband and I, we also do flip houses and short-term rentals, so we have a whole separate kind of write-off structure that we need to keep in an organized fashion to know how to submit those write-offs at the end of the year. And so I use Excel for both locums and for our investments. And basically what I'm doing is throughout those, I just keep a close track of every city that I'm in, how many days a month I'm in each city. And then so I use that to help keep track of my food reimbursements based off of the city and the federal government's per diem rates. And then I also just keep track of all the things that I buy that is related to work for locums, and I keep those organized in like a monthly structure on Excel, and it's kind of separated by, is this like telecommunications and internet use, or is this actual property, whether that's like a laptop or a new stethoscope, scrubs, things like that. And you just organize it that way in a structure that's very easy to plug and play for your CPA at the end of the day, when they're submitting that for your write-offs. But in general, that's kind of it. As long as you can just keep track of what needs to be sent for your CPA, if you're not doing it on your own independently at the end of the year, for a kind of a write-off structure, then all you need are your 1099s. So it's not too terrible. But
I also use just a simple spreadsheet through Google Sheets to keep track of everything. It can be kind of annoying to track. It is a little bit extra time here and there, but like you said, there are definitely lots of benefits and money savings overall, so it is worth it over time to do that.
Yeah, it's not too terrible. I think I do it pretty much quarterly. So
same here with that.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about how you and your husband also do real estate investing. Could you share a little bit more about that? What does it look like for you? What type of real estate investing have you guys done over the years?
Yeah, so I know I touched on a little bit earlier that I was inspired by my stepdad, who came from and started doing a ton of house renovations, house flips, short-term and long-term rentals when he was very young, all until he retired. Retired early, very jealous. So I basically, as soon as I graduated PA school, I knew I wanted to buy a short-term rental as soon as I could save the money to do so. And so talking back a little bit about living beneath your means, I moved somewhere and got a two-bedroom apartment that was very cheap when I took my first job as being a physician assistant. And I found a roommate on Craigslist, which is scary to say that out loud nowadays. And she was also a physician assistant, so she seemed very normal. We got along very well. She actually ended up being the person who got me my next job. So butterfly effect, it was amazing. And she's amazing. But ultimately, I spent, almost nothing to live in my apartment so that I could pay off my student loans as quick as possible, which took me 2 years to pay off all of my student loan debt from PA school. I did not have
Awesome.
undergrad loans, but PA school.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And then as soon as I had that paid off, I saved as much money as possible until I could buy my first rental property in Florida. It was, of course, on a mortgage, but I bought my first rental property and then I started Airbnb-ing it. So the initial thing there was short-term rentals, because if you can find a short-term rental and you can, of course, have as minimal of a mortgage as possible so that your income on it will be much higher. If you find it in the right spot, Airbnbs are amazing. And they do not need to be where you live. I think a lot of people get hung up on, well, what if something happens? I need to live right there. I have never lived directly close to any of the Airbnbs we've owned. You just have to be flexible and know how to reach out to people who can fix things. And it's very rare that things like that happen. But anyways, so I started in a short-term rental situation. I eventually took that place and 1031 exchanged it into a bigger place when we had more money so that we could buy outright the next rental property so that there was zero mortgage on it, so that all of the income coming from that is purely cash. And then we took the income from that structure over a year and put that down on our first flip house together. My husband, when I met him, he had already done flip houses in the past. So I am very lucky, truthfully, that I found somebody who shares the same passion that I have for income producing properties and for maybe also a little bit of like hard labor. I will say the more that you can do by yourself, the more that you can renovate, the more things that you can learn to do by yourself in the setting of real estate, flipping and renting, the much more money that you'll make because the labor that costs that exists nowadays for things is outrageous. Um, and I've learned that so much from my husband just by the things that we've done, and then we've seen what people charge for it. I'm like, this is what you should do for a living because oh my God, you could make so much money. But anyways, in general, there's a great opportunity out there for short-term rentals if you can find the right one, and it's a great place to funnel your money where you will see more of a return on your investment than you would in the stock market in, say 1 year or 2 years. And then ultimately you can sell these things when they're worth more money or keep them when they're worth less money and rent them out. And then outside of that, flipping, like I said, flipping houses, it's the same kind of thing. It's definitely a niche job, niche work. You have to know the location that you're purchasing something in and know what it's worth. Normally, it does require a lot of, day-to-day research on a spot that you know is growing, that you can find a slightly older home, buy it with the intention of renovating it, and know that it's going to be worth significantly more money when you're done with it. But then again, along the way, I will say, if you can do the work yourself and you can flip the inside of that house and make it new again, you will save so, so much money than paying somebody else to do it, and you'll end up making a ton more money on it. But I know, unfortunately, that's not available to everyone. I am so lucky and blessed to have and be spoiled to have my husband who knows how to do all those things with his hands. But if you don't have that, short-term rentals is a much better avenue to take where you can buy a place that just needs a little bit of fixing up, a little bit new furniture and paint, make it look great, and then make a great income on things like that. So I think everybody should buy short-term rentals.
That's so awesome. I appreciate you sharing your perspective. And I also have a handy husband who was able to renovate our whole last house. So I hear you
Yes,
on that. That
yes.
is amazing.
It is you don't marry for money, marry for hard blue collar labor. It is worth
Yes,
so much more. Yeah.
totally. Totally. Yes. There's a lot to be said. A little side tangent. There's a lot to be said about
Yes.
the trades and hardworking manual
Oh
labor jobs out there
God.
for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I'm
Diamond in the
I have a
rough.
couple of follow-up questions
Yeah.
for you about that. The first follow-up question that I have was, could you clarify, are you 1031 exchanging all of your properties and pretty
Oh,
much maintaining one short-term rental, or are you growing more and more and having several short-term rentals?
yeah, so we're actually, funny enough, we're in that exact setting right now where we are working to sell one of our properties that we had previously 1031 exchanged into and put more cash into it. So it's fully owned and outright. And we are looking into, like what you just said, we're looking to try to sell it to 1031 exchange into two other properties. So, yes, to some instance, we are trying to grow that structure, but how 1031 exchanges work, not that this was something we were going to particularly touch on, is in order to avoid paying the capital gains tax on the sale, you have to have an investment that you are buying of equal value. So we would have to buy at least one property that is worth as much as this one. But in this instance, it is more beneficial for us to just buy two new ones for like slightly lesser. So we'll ultimately still end up paying probably partially a mortgage on one and then have the cash to buy the other. But it allows us to expand what we own and have now multiple rentals that will ultimately make us more money. But it will require at this point, one mortgage for a period of time on one of them with the intention of then trying to either pay that off or we'll eventually 1031 exchange that one into something else. Um, but yeah, you can make it work however you want. But once you've bought something through a 1031 exchange, if you sell it with the intention of not buying another investment property, then of course the the option doesn't really exist to exchange it, and then you would end up paying capital gains on that. But yes, we're going to try to just keep exchanging it for other investments for who knows until we don't want to do investments anymore. So
Sure.
yeah.
My other follow-up question that I had was, I was curious for your flips. Are you guys choosing to live in your house flips for 2 years to prevent some of the capital gains and things like
Yeah.
that? Or do you have your own either primary residence house or rent and then do those flips on the side a little bit more quickly?
Yeah, so purely out of, again, if you wanted to be super smart, you could live in the house and flip it. The two flips that we have done, we live in our own primary residence, and that's purely out of just we've had to have somewhere to live. I also travel for work. My husband travels for work, so we needed to have a home base. The flip houses that we've done, again, it just comes from the research of knowing about how long it's going to take us to do, how many bathrooms are there. It's going to take, one long weekend each to completely gut a bathroom and then, another weekend to maybe completely redo a bathroom. And then knowing kind of those things, like how long is it going to take us to do this kitchen, this room, what exactly needs to be done in each house when you're looking at them so that you have a good timeline of how long it would take you to flip it and whether or not you have that time and what your schedule would look like to do that, so that we don't have to necessarily live there. But then you are going to have a hold cost, of course, because if you're buying a flip house with a mortgage, which is like what we did on the last one, you are going to be paying a mortgage on it. So you want to get it flipped as soon as possible so that you're not losing much money on your mortgage payment. And that comes in as a cost, a hold cost. But ultimately, when you're still going to say you're going to make $70,000 on it, if in the 6 month period of time, you lose whether it's $12,000 on holding it, then you're subtracting that from your net 70 grand. You're still going to make good money, but is that worth it for you? That's what ultimately you have to figure out a little bit with actual flip houses. But it would be a great opportunity for someone if you were to move somewhere, buy a place that you knew you could flip over the next 2 years slowly and live in. That's a great way to do it as well. And then you do not have to pay the same taxes on the end of the sale. So yeah,
Awesome. Thanks so
yeah.
much for sharing.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, you mentioned how you guys really like short-term rentals. Is there something that you enjoy most about them, or do you have any other advice for someone who's thinking about investing in real estate for the first time?
Yeah, I think one of the best things you can do is self-manage. A lot of people get freaked out with short-term rentals, and they think that they need to like pay somebody to manage or short-term rental, or people get freaked out because they think having a an Airbnb or a short-term rental would take so much work and so much effort to coordinate the people checking in and checking out. It's the same thing as like a 1099. It's as soon as it takes work up front to set up the actual, Airbnb website, VRBO website. You have to put pictures on and coordinate all the check-in and check-out instructions. But once you have all of that done, it's like automated. There is very little information that you need to send or converse with anybody who's checking in or checking out. You find a cleaning service who you work with and they clean when people leave. If there are problems, normally again, you'll find like a local handyman or a local plumber or something that as things arise, you can depend on if something happens, but those things are few and far between. But for the most part, for instance, like one of our rentals right now, which is hours and hours away from us, and the last time I was there was a year ago. Um, my husband and I will try to go down typically twice a year to like bring new furniture or whatever needs to be done, new bikes, things like that. But generally speaking, I barely touch my Airbnb or VRBO unless it's just specific questions that people are reaching out with. But we pay someone on site just to clean. And our cleaning crew does have the access to view all of the messages on Airbnb. So if they have questions about like checking in early or they ran out of toilet paper or something, our cleaners can answer those things for the most part. And yes, I talk to my cleaner maybe once a month, but again, this equates to like maybe an hour of my time all month long to run a fully functioning Airbnb, and you're making tons of tons of income. And again, it depends on where you buy, with how much money you will make. The more money you can put down in a obviously more interested location for traveling, a heavy tourist location is going to demand more money to purchase something, but you will make more money there. So it's not as hard as people think it is. It's really not.
I appreciate you sharing good stories about this, and it sounds
Yeah,
like you haven't had too many bad stories about it. Unfortunately, I've heard horror stories from other people, but at
yeah,
the same time, there are so many people like yourselves that have had
yeah.
really great experience. So I
I,
appreciate you taking the time and share that.
Yeah, and not to interrupt there, I mean, I'm not going to say I haven't had a couple horror stories. I have. Like, we have definitely had one time, like 4 years ago on Thanksgiving, my rental property's single bathroom at the time overflowed and was
Oh
not
no,
working. And that was
bummer.
definitely not fun to deal with on Thanksgiving. I was very stressed trying to get a hold of a plumber on Thanksgiving Day to go there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what I did was I just told the guests, I said, you know what? I will pay for you to go anywhere else and stay at a hotel tonight, and I will have it fixed by tomorrow because there was just nothing that I could do. And now I know I have that experience. I know if that happens to me again on Christmas Day, I'm probably just going to say, here's a ton of money. I feel terrible because I know I'm going to lose this money, but I'm not going to get paid for today. You go check yourself in somewhere. This is on me. I'm terribly sorry that this has happened. I'll get it fixed. And everything has a workaround. It was fixed the next day. They were able to come back. I did not make money on their stay, but when that happens once every 4 years, um, there are things that happen, but those horror stories are way overshadowed with the income that it generates. So it's just worth it. But
Yeah.
for me, at least, I get it, what people say. But
Yeah, for sure. And again, it goes back to you are a problem solver and can figure things out.
yeah, you gotta be flexible. You gotta figure it out.
Thanks so much for sharing about your real estate investing experiences that you've had over the years. I'm also curious, working as a PA, so many of us have gone through burnout, and it sounds as though maybe the pandemic was a time of burnout for you, but maybe other times throughout your career. Do you mind sharing a little bit about how that happened and what helped you work through it, whether there were different decisions you made or boundaries that you set or different habits that you put in place?
Yes, everybody in healthcare I know has had periods of burnout. So of course, I've definitely experienced my own episodes of burnout, and I still do. With COVID, certainly, but there was tons of times where you just work too much and the grind is just hard. Working critical care itself too can be kind of sometimes dark. So I really don't know what the best way is for everybody to deal with it. I think it's really knowing yourself. And I think the most important thing is recognizing when you're burnt out. I think some people just get so focused and so into this is work. I have to do it because I have to take care of myself, my family, and that is honorable. But when you recognize that you are at your wit's end, I think the most important thing is giving yourself space, giving yourself the grace to take space, that it's okay to say, I need a weekend off. I need a time off, even if it's one day, whatever it is that you specifically value or brings you peace is what you should focus on pursuing temporarily. You can always come back, and there's nothing wrong with taking a weekend off or saying, I am not in a good space right now. I will be right back. And even if it's while you're at work, I will be back in 10 minutes and go sit in your office and just listen to music or be in silence for 10 minutes because something was too much. Those are, I think, logical, responsible ways of dealing with feelings, emotions, and stress. And so I think that for myself personally, when I find myself getting too burnt out, my husband is definitely like my diary. And so I go to him with like, I am just overloaded. I need a break. And then we try to just plan, a weekend getaway, whether that's we're just going to go to a beach. We're not going to do anything. We're going to have, nice beach drinks and food and go to a spa and have a spa day or just relax and do nothing, whatever it is, or a day in with Netflix, simple things even enough to bring you a comfort, to let your mind just reset and do not think about work. Like, let it
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
That can
So,
definitely be hard for people, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
And it's a good reminder that we're not machines. It's very normal
No,
to
yeah,
respond and react to different things that you see. And especially you see a lot of traumatic things throughout your work. So it's good
yeah,
that you have those different micro resets that you can do throughout the day, but also take the time to go
yeah,
away and
yeah,
relax for a while.
yeah. I think it's probably good too to have both someone to talk to, no matter who it is. If it's like your friend, your mom, your spouse, somebody at work, somebody outside of work who has no idea what you're talking about. My husband doesn't do anything in healthcare. I tell him literally everything that happens, and he half the time has no idea what I'm saying. But just having an outlet of someone who you can release some of those things to, I think is huge. And then probably also just having habits that are healthy, whether that's like exercise or cooking or, music, something that is positive that you do on a regular basis, I think keeps people also a little bit more grounded and less likely to feel burnt out.
Yeah.
But
And can you remind me what year you graduated as a PA? Was it 2017?
yes, 2017.
Okay.
Mhm.
So you've been
I
a
can't
PA
think about
now
it.
for almost a decade. Not
I
quite, but
know.
almost a
Wow.
decade.
That's so
But
crazy.
looking back over your PA career, is there anything that you feel like you wish you would have known earlier about money, investing in general, or designing your PA career that you would have maybe done differently over the years?
Um, So where I am now, I definitely am glad for exactly how it happened. So I'm not terribly upset, but there are things where I had moments I look back to now, like the very first time ever asked for a raise, and I had been at that hospital for 3 years, and I know they basically balked at me and said that I was, money grubbing and that was just something that they didn't do. I remember feeling terrible. And I will say, I think it was my first time ever asking for a raise in my entire life. So I don't think I went about it in the right way. I probably was not very polished or organized. I was trying to be. I was trying to be like hardened and professional, and maybe that didn't come off the right way. But the response that I got looking back now, I recognize, okay, that is just the way that unfortunately industry is, and that's also not right. And I recognize now that what physician assistants, nurse practitioners, healthcare professionals bring to the plate, bring to the table is invaluable. And so recognizing what you are worth is it matters and you are right. Like if you feel that, hey, that just didn't seem right and I really don't think that I'm out of line doing this, you're not crazy, they're crazy. And I know that now for a fact because I have locumed back at that hospital for double the money that they were paying me. And that's sad. That's so sad. I could have stayed there for the tiniest little raise for a really long time, but I'm glad that they shut that door. I would have never done what I did. And so I think learning to recognize your worth and feeling more confident in yourself as a provider, as a clinician, is huge because you do bring more than you think you do to the table. So,
It's always a great reminder to recognize and negotiate your worth, and a reminder that we as clinicians are the income generators for
yeah,
the clinic, for the hospital. It's how
yeah,
these places can bill and get
yeah,
money. So they
yeah,
need you to earn money themselves. So that's a
yeah,
great reminder.
yeah.
And I'm curious how being on the path to financial independence has changed the way you practice medicine, if it has at all over the years.
Well, so I'm not completely financial independent yet. So you'll have to come back in 10 years and ask me this question again. But what I would definitely say is already it has given me the confidence to do things and go and take different jobs that I wouldn't have done before. I think the reality is for a lot of us, and for me, even, a few years ago, my job was everything. It was my income. It was how I was living day to day. And so you can't just up and leave your job because that's not the responsible thing to do. And how are you going to take care of yourself or your family? Once you have a little bit of stability and you have the option to say, I don't like what this is, or I want to work somewhere else, or I want to try something else that is a risk, you now have that ability to go and do that. And so you can pursue other opportunities that you otherwise might not have because you did not feel that it was stable enough. For instance, locums. A lot of people are scared because they think it's not a stable source of income because it does. It requires work on your end to make sure you have continuous work. It requires work on your end to be willing to potentially travel if what is near you dries up and is no longer needing your assistance. But it allows you to grow and learn and see so many things that you wouldn't have seen if you didn't take that risk or you weren't capable of taking that risk. So the financial independence I have gained so far has allowed my husband and I to do a lot of things and see a lot of things and go a lot of places that we never would have without it. So I think it makes me a better provider because I come into work not 100% because I absolutely need the paycheck. Because yes, I need the paycheck, but I could go without that paycheck for a period of time. I do choose to go to work in this area of medicine because I literally love it. And I don't necessarily want to say literally, but like because I love what I do and I get to go and do something that I love that I do because I can. And I get to do it where I want to do it now because I can, which is really nice. It's kind of a blessing, and not a lot of people get that. So,
Love that. You
mhm.
have been able to create this opportunity for yourself to practice because you want to and not because you absolutely have to, and
Yeah.
maintain that pressure. And that can make you come from a place of confidence and create more options and more freedom throughout both your life and your career.
Yeah. And it's brought my husband and I the capability to do crazy, silly things outside of work, travel cool places, build houses, but like flip houses, build things that we wouldn't have been able to do without the financial independence that this job career has initially brought me. Um, but yeah, it creates a space where I feel positive. I get to take my positive energy to work and cheer for the patients, the people that I work with that may otherwise also be in a bad place or not necessarily financially independent, but just not independent or not in a good space. And so I think being independent, being stable, being positive outside of work allows that to melt into your work. And it is palpable with people that I work with that I can tell they are successful both in and outside of the hospital. And I want to be like that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious if there's a PA listening today and they're feeling stuck either financially or professionally. What would one piece of advice or encouragement that you'd want to leave them with be?
I thought about this, and I think my piece of advice really is don't quit. Keep going. Even when you feel worthless or you think that you are the worst physician assistant in the world, you are absolutely not, and I will be the first person to tell you that. And you absolutely will fail. All of us have failed at some point, and even if that failure is something small, we have all failed, or it's a very large failure. We have all failed. We've all made mistakes. You absolutely will make mistakes. You will fail, and that is normal. And that is the only way to grow and find other opportunities that will eventually bring you success. And the other very important thing I want to say was do not be scared to ask for help. I think a lot of us grew up in these, I have to be able to do everything by myself. I have to be completely independent, and I can't ask someone to, put in a good word for me or bother somebody to help me when I'm not in a good place or I'm trying to pursue something for myself. Ask for help. People are human beings just like yourself. If someone comes to me and asks me like, "Hey, I really want this job," or "Hey, I'm super curious about locums. Can you just tell me a little bit about it?" Everyone's always so apprehensive just to ask these simple questions or to ask to write a recommendation letter or something like that. People are human beings. They've been in your shoes before. They understand what you're going through. You will be amazed to find how human and happy and healthy other people will be to your questions and how open people and willing people are to help you in your times of need and whatever that need may be. So do not be afraid to ask for help in your career. The people who are genuinely good people and need to be in your career or you should surround yourself by will be willing to help you and want to see you succeed. Good people in medicine want to see other people in medicine succeed. So seek those people out. That's what I would say.
And speaking, if people have questions, if there's a listener out there that would like to connect with you, or if they'd like to follow along with your journey or reach out with questions that they have, do you mind sharing how they can connect with you?
Yeah, so I do kind of a funny just jokes Instagram page mostly about critical care. I do have a couple inserts on there about locum tenens, what it's like and the financial side of it, but it's kind of few and far between. My handle is that locums PA. That's on Instagram. Otherwise, it's the same thing. If you wanted to shoot me an email, it's my Gmail is that locumspa@gmail.com. Super simple. Feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer any personal questions anybody has about anything in the realm, the lens of being a locums PA. I tell everybody that is really serious about it that you are your own CEO when you have an S-corp, and that is the dream. Be your own CEO. Advocate for yourself. Go shoot for the stars. Make the money. Find the dream jobs. Find the inspirational characters that you get to work around and learn from. It's all out there for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all this wonderful information, Alexis. We really appreciate you taking the time and sharing about your experiences, your insight that you've had over the years. And it's just been such a fun conversation. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you decide to continue to join me along this journey of becoming a PA the FI way. Please take a moment to press the subscribe button on the platform that you are listening to this on, but more importantly, consider sharing with another current or future PA that could benefit from the information that we reviewed in this episode. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Until next time.